The HOA sent fake animal control to take my K9s, but they messed with the wrong owner. It started with 2 men at my gate, flashing a bogus seizure order, with the smug HOA president watching from her car. She claimed my retired police dogs were a danger to the neighborhood. But while she was busy faking documents, she had no idea her hired thugs were about to cut my gate lock in the middle of the night. They thought they were just stealing a couple of pets. They weren't prepared for what was waiting for them on the other side. What do you think happens when criminals break in to steal 2 retired K9s? Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments, because this story of when the wrong people get a taste of justice is one you don't want to miss. The knock came on a Saturday morning, just as the first rays of sun were cutting through the blinds. It wasn't a friendly knock, not the kind a neighbor makes when they've got an extra batch of cookies. This was a sharp, official rap on the metal of my front gate. I've lived in this house for 15 years, and I know the sounds of my street. This sound was wrong. Muffled voices followed, low and impatient. I got up from the kitchen table, leaving my coffee steaming, and walked to the front window. 2 men stood there, dressed in what looked like city-style uniforms. They were dark green, with patches on the sleeves and the words "Animal Control" stitched in yellow across their chests. They looked the part. Almost. I've done enough work with city permits and inspectors over the years to know what official uniforms look like. These were just a little off. The fabric seemed cheaper. The cut a bit too generic, like something you'd order from a costume website. My 2 K9s, Max and Riley, hadn't made a sound. They were lying in the sun on the back patio, enjoying the morning. These dogs, retired from service, were the calmest animals you'd ever meet unless given a reason not to be. They were behind a 6-foot fence, secure and quiet. The men at the gate hadn't even seen them, yet here they were. I went to the door and spoke through the intercom. "Can I help you?" The taller of the 2 men stepped forward. He had a clipboard and an air of self-importance. "Sir, we're from Animal Control. We've received a complaint about a dangerous animal on this property. We need to perform an immediate inspection." I looked at them through the small security camera I'd installed by the gate. A quick rewind of the last few minutes of footage confirmed my suspicion. They hadn't arrived in a city vehicle. There was no official truck with a municipal seal on the door. They'd pulled up in an unmarked black SUV that was now parked halfway down the street, too far to be seen easily from the house, but not too far for my cameras. "A complaint?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "What kind of complaint?" The second man, shorter and thicker set, spoke up. "We're not required to disclose that information. We have an order for inspection. Open the gate." His tone was aggressive, meant to intimidate. I've learned that when people push that hard, it's usually because they don't have the real authority to back it up. I'm a patient man. I built this house with my own hands, and I did it by measuring twice and cutting once. I apply the same principle to people. "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding," I said politely. "My dogs are secured. Why don't you wait there while I call the city's official animal control number? We can clear this up in a few minutes." This suggestion seemed to annoy them. The tall one grumbled something to his partner. I took out my phone and dialed the number for the county's animal services, a number I kept saved, just in case. It went straight to voicemail. It was a Saturday, after all. I left a calm, detailed message, explaining the situation and asking for a call back. I thought that would be the end of it, that they'd realize I wasn't going to be bullied and they would leave. But then, the situation took a sharp turn. As I was finishing my message, the taller man held up a piece of paper to my camera. "We have an emergency seizure order," he said, his voice flat. I zoomed in on the document. It looked official enough at first glance, with bold letters at the top. Emergency Animal Seizure Order. But it wasn't a court document. It was printed on what looked like standard office paper, and bore the letterhead of the Homeowners Association. And that's when I saw her. Down the street, a familiar silver sedan was parked behind the black SUV. The driver's side door opened, and Karen, the HOA president, stepped out. She didn't approach my gate. She just stood there, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with a smug little smile on her face. She was supervising. The pieces clicked into place with a cold, heavy thud. This wasn't official. This wasn't about a complaint from a concerned neighbor. This was personal. This was an attack orchestrated by a woman who had made it her mission to make my life difficult since the day I refused to comply with her demand to repaint my perfectly fine, city code compliant fence a different shade of beige. I looked from the fake order in the man's hand to the woman standing down the street, and I knew this was just the beginning. I had built my home to be a fortress of peace and privacy, and they had just declared war. They just didn't know who they were dealing with. My mind went from angry to cold in a heartbeat. The moment I saw Karen standing there, supervising her little theater of intimidation, all emotion drained away and was replaced by a quiet, clear purpose. I kept my voice perfectly level through the intercom. "You have no jurisdiction here. Leave my property immediately." They started to bluster again, but I simply cut the connection. They could stand out there and yell all they wanted. My first priority was to preserve the evidence. I walked over to my desktop computer, the one I use for managing the home security system. The timestamp on the screen read Saturday 9:42 a.m. I saved the entire video file from the front gate camera, from the moment the black SUV pulled up to the moment I cut the intercom. I created a new folder on a dedicated hard drive and named it HOA Incident. Everything would go in this folder. I replayed the footage on a large monitor, pausing and zooming in. The uniforms had badge numbers, but they were a strange format: AC 1138 and AC 1139. Not a standard municipal code. I wrote them down in a new digital notepad file, along with the license plate of the unmarked SUV. I transcribed their exact words: dangerous animal complaint, immediate inspection, emergency seizure order. Details matter. They are the bricks you use to build your case. Then, I focused on the seizure order the man had held up. I took a high-resolution screenshot. The document was a joke, but a dangerous one. At the top it said, City of Sunwood Animal Enforcement. But the font was Times New Roman, the kind everyone has on their computer. Official city documents always used a specific, clean, sans serif font. There was no official city seal, just a cheap-looking clip art of a paw print. Most importantly, it wasn't signed by a judge or a city official. The only signature at the bottom was that of the HOA secretary, a woman who was known to be Karen's closest ally on the board. And then I saw the detail that revealed the true purpose of this whole charade. In small print, it listed a compliance fee of $1,500 due immediately to the Homeowners Association to avoid seizure. This wasn't about safety. This was a shakedown. It was extortion, wrapped in a fake uniform and a forged document. With the initial evidence secured, I made a phone call. My buddy Frank is a retired police detective. We worked a few construction jobs together after he left the force, and he's the kind of guy you want on your side when things get weird. I sent him the screenshot of the license plate and the fake badge numbers. "Frank," I said, "I've got a situation here. HOA is playing games." I gave him the short version. He was quiet for a moment. "Unmarked SUV and fake papers? This stinks," he said. "Don't talk to them again. Don't answer the door. I'll run these plates and check the city's internal database for any seizure orders or complaints against your address. There won't be any, but we need to prove it. I'll call you back." Knowing Frank was on it was a relief. He knew the system, and he knew how to separate facts from fiction. I figured I would just sit tight and wait for his call. But Karen wasn't done for the day. While I was documenting her first attack, she was already launching the second. Out of curiosity, I logged into the official HOA community web portal. And there it was, a new post from Karen, Uploaded just minutes ago. It was titled, Emergency Board Notice. Dangerous Animals, on Lot 7. My lot. The post was a work of fiction. It accused my dogs of attacking a child near my property line. It described them as unstable and a clear and present danger to the safety of our children. It was a public declaration of war, designed to turn the entire neighborhood against me through fear. But it was the image attached to the post that made my blood run cold. It was a photo of Max and Riley in my backyard. It was a still frame, cropped tightly to show them standing near the back fence, their heads up and alert. The angle was low, making them look bigger and more menacing than they were. But I knew that photo. I knew the exact angle. I knew the clarity. It wasn't taken from a neighbor's yard or from the street. It was a frame from my own backyard security camera. They had been spying on me. Karen hadn't just sent fake cops to my gate. She had found a way to hack into my private security feed. She had violated my home, my privacy, in the most profound way. This was no longer just about HOA rules or a personal grudge. This was a serious crime. The realization hit me hard. They weren't just trying to get rid of my dogs. They were trying to destroy me, and they were willing to break any law to do it. The game had changed, and the stakes were now higher than I could have ever imagined. The rest of Saturday was quiet. Too quiet. I spent the day reinforcing my digital security. I changed every password, enabled two-factor authentication on every account, and ran a deep scan of my network to see how they could have accessed my camera feed. It looked like they'd exploited a vulnerability in the router's firmware, an oversight on my part that I immediately corrected. Frank called back late in the afternoon. Just as we expected, the license plate on the black SUV was registered to a shell corporation with a P.O. box for an address. The badge numbers didn't exist in any municipal or state database. He confirmed there was no complaint, no official order, and no record of any city employee being dispatched to my home. It was all a fabrication, a play put on by Karen. The knowledge was useful, but it didn't make the knot in my stomach loosen. Sunday morning, they came back. I saw them on the camera feed before they even reached the gate. This time, they parked the black SUV directly in front of my house, a clear attempt at intimidation, and they had a new vehicle with them, a white, windowless van. It was the kind you see used for commercial work, completely unmarked. The same two men got out, but today, they were carrying more than just a clipboard. They had catch poles, the long metal rods with a loop at the end used to handle animals from a distance. The sight of those poles made my blood run cold. They weren't just for show, they were tools for taking my dogs. They strode to the gate with a new kind of confidence, an aggressive swagger that told me they believed they had the upper hand now. The taller one banged on the gate with his fist. "Open up! We have an order to seize the animals under City Safety Law 204.5, he shouted. His voice was loud, intended for any neighbors who might be listening. "If you refuse to comply, we will have the sheriff's department remove you for obstructing a lawful action." I walked calmly to the intercom. I had spent part of the previous night not just securing my cameras, but preparing for this very moment. I had gone to the city's official website and downloaded the entire municipal code related to animal control. I'd printed out the relevant sections. I held the papers in my hand. "Good morning," I said, my voice as flat and steady as a concrete slab. "You are citing a non-existent law. There is no City Safety Law 204.5. I assume you are referring to Municipal Code, Chapter 6, Section 8, which deals with potentially dangerous animals." I could see them through the camera, their confident expressions faltering. They exchanged a confused look. "That code," I continued, "requires a formal complaint to be filed and investigated by a certified animal control officer, followed by a written warning to the owner, and then a preliminary hearing. You have completed none of those steps. Furthermore, Your seizure order from yesterday is fraudulent. It lacks a case number, a judicial signature, and an official city seal. It is a worthless piece of paper. The shorter man snarled. We don't have time for this. We have our orders. Open the gate, or we're calling the sheriff. This was the moment they thought would break me. It's a common tactic. Threaten with higher authority. But I knew it was a bluff. If they called the sheriff, their whole scam would be exposed. Please do, I said, my voice still calm. I would welcome a visit from a real law enforcement officer. I'd be happy to show them the high-resolution video of your trespass yesterday and of this current attempt at intimidation. I can also provide them with the license plate of your unregistered vehicle. Silence. The two men stood there. Their bluff called. They were cornered, and they knew it. And then, as if on cue, my phone rang. I looked at the caller ID. It was Officer Davies, the actual animal control officer from the city, returning my call from Saturday. It was perfect. I answered the phone, keeping my eye on the camera feed. Hello, this is he. I listened for a moment as Officer Davies introduced himself and apologized for the delay. He sounded professional, exactly what you'd expect. Yes, thank you for calling back, I said clearly. I just wanted to confirm something. Can you tell me if there have been any dangerous animal complaints or seizure orders issued for my address at 124 Oak Street? I could see the two men at the gate shifting their weight, straining to hear. Officer Davies was clear. No, sir. I've checked our entire system. There are no complaints, no warnings, and certainly no seizure orders active for your property. Is there a problem? A slow smile spread across my face. Officer Davies, I said, would you mind if I put you on speakerphone for a moment? There are two gentlemen at my gate wearing animal control uniforms who seem to think otherwise. Before he could even answer, I hit the speaker button and held the phone right up to the intercom microphone. Officer Davies's voice boomed out into the quiet morning air. This is Officer Davies of Sunwood City Animal Control. To whom am I speaking? The two fake officers froze. They looked like statues. There is no official action scheduled at 124 Oak Street, Officer Davies's voice echoed from the gate speaker. Anyone claiming to be there on official city business is misrepresenting themselves. I watched their faces on the monitor. The color drained from them. They were caught, utterly and completely exposed. Without another word, they turned and practically ran back to their van and SUV. They didn't look back. As they sped away, I saw Karen's car, which had been parked down the street, hidden from my main camera. She got out and stomped her foot, her face a mask of pure rage. She pulled out her phone and started yelling into it. Then, she looked directly at my house, directly at the camera she must have known was there. She didn't shout, but her voice was so filled with venom it carried across the lawn. You'll regret this, she hissed. Just before her car sped off after the others, I zoomed my camera in on the black SUV. The passenger was holding his phone up, taking pictures of the small, discreet security warning signs I had posted along my fence line. They weren't just retreating, they were already planning their next attack. The silence that followed their retreat was heavier than the shouting had been. I stood in my living room for a long time, watching the empty street on my monitor. The victory felt hollow, temporary. Karen's parting words, "You'll regret this," weren't a threat. They were a promise. She had been publicly humiliated. Her hired thugs had been exposed. A person like her couldn't let that stand. I knew the next attack wouldn't be so direct. She had tried force and failed. Now, she would turn to a weapon she knew how to wield much better: the power of the community itself. She would try to turn my neighbors against me. And she didn't wait long. The next day, a thick, cream-colored envelope appeared in my mailbox, addressed simply to Current Resident. It was a letter from the HOA, personally signed by Karen. I'm sure one was delivered to every single house in our subdivision. The letter was a masterpiece of manipulative language. It didn't mention the fake animal control, or the failed attempt to enter my property. Instead, it painted a picture of a concerned president trying to protect the neighborhood from a reckless and dangerous homeowner. It claimed that my dogs were unstable and trained to attack, citing the same incident with the child that had never happened. The language was carefully chosen to inspire fear, using words like vicious, unpredictable, and liability. It announced that due to the imminent threat and my refusal to cooperate with a routine safety inspection, she was calling an emergency HOA meeting for the following week. The agenda was singular and brutal: a community vote on whether to begin legal proceedings to have me removed from my home for the safety and well-being of all residents. She was trying to get my neighbors to vote me out of my own house. I read the letter twice, my hands steady. This was her real play. She wasn't just trying to take my dogs anymore. She was trying to take everything. I went back to my computer. Her first attack had been with muscle. This one was with paper. So I would fight back with paper. My kitchen table became a command center. I started printing. I printed every email I had ever exchanged with Karen, from the first polite disagreement about the fence to this new declaration of war. I printed the high-resolution screenshots of the fake seizure order, with arrows pointing to the mismatched font and the lack of a city seal. I printed out the HOA's own rules and regulations, the section on animal ownership highlighted in yellow. It clearly stated that any complaints had to be verified and documented, none of which had been done. I created a precise timeline of events, using the timestamps from my camera footage. Saturday, 9:42 a.m. 2 unidentified males attempt to gain entry. Sunday, 10:15 a.m. Same males return with catch poles. Each entry was a fact, a solid, unchangeable point in time. Then I went to the city and county websites and downloaded the official municipal codes for animal control, property rights, and trespass. I highlighted the sections that proved my every action had been lawful, and that every one of their actions had been illegal. My binder of evidence grew thick. Each piece of paper was a brick in the wall of truth I was building around my home and my name. As the week of the emergency meeting progressed, I felt the atmosphere in the neighborhood shift. When I checked my mail, neighbors who were usually friendly would suddenly look down at their lawns. The few who made eye contact gave me a look that was a mixture of pity and fear. They had read Karen's letter. They were scared of her, but they were also scared of my dogs now, thanks to her lies. I felt isolated, like an island. But then, something shifted. It happened on a Wednesday evening. I was taking out the trash when my next-door neighbor, a quiet mechanic named Bill, was doing the same. He looked around nervously, then walked over, not meeting my eyes. "She did the same thing to me last year," he said in a low voice. "Said the shed I built was the wrong shade of brown. The exact shade specified in the rules. Fined me $1,000. When I fought it, she sent me a letter from an attorney that turned out to be her cousin who does real estate law. It's all just bullying." He glanced over his shoulder. "Be careful," he said. "She doesn't play fair." The next day, I found a plain manila envelope tucked under my doormat. Inside was a collection of documents. There were copies of 3 different violation notices sent to other homeowners, all for minor, ridiculous things. One was for having a garden hose visible from the street. Another was for a political sign that was 2 inches too tall. Tucked in with them was a copy of the complaint about Bill's shed. It was my first piece of proof that I wasn't her only target. Karen didn't just have a problem with me. She had a problem with anyone who didn't bend to her will. A few more neighbors reached out quietly, slipping me their own stories of abuse. The fear was still there, but beneath it, a quiet rebellion was stirring. Karen had pushed too many people too far. My binder got thicker. I now had a section titled Pattern of Harassment. The night before the meeting, I felt as prepared as I could be. My evidence was organized. My arguments were clear. I believed that once the other homeowners saw the facts, they would see Karen for what she was. But Karen had one more move to make. One final act of escalation. The fight wasn't just on paper anymore. It was around 11:30 p.m. I was in my workshop, going over my notes one last time, when my phone buzzed with an alert. It was from my security system. Motion detected at the side gate. I pulled up the live feed on my monitor. The image was grainy in the infrared night vision, but it was unmistakable. The same white, windowless van from Sunday morning was parked on the access road behind my property. Two figures emerged. They were wearing the same fake uniforms. One of them carried a tool, a pair of long-handled bolt cutters. As I watched in stunned silence, he put the jaws of the cutters around the heavy chain and padlock on my side gate. There was a dull, metallic snap that the camera's microphone picked up clearly. The chain fell away. The gate was open. They were no longer knocking. They were breaking in. My workshop is my sanctuary, a place of order and precision where every tool has its place. It was in this calm space that the alert hit my phone with the sharp buzz of an alarm. The timestamp on the notification read, Tuesday, 11:30 p.m. Motion detected. Side gate. My blood went cold. This was it. I spun my chair around to the security monitor, my heart pounding a steady, heavy rhythm against my ribs. The infrared camera painted the scene in ghostly shades of gray and white. There it was, the windowless white van, backing slowly into the access lane behind my fence line. Its engine a low rumble in the night. The doors opened, and the same two men stepped out, still wearing their ridiculous fake uniforms. But this time, they moved with a grim purpose. They weren't here to talk. They weren't here to threaten. They were here to act. One of them, the taller one, carried the bolt cutters. He moved to the side gate, and I watched, helpless, as the tool that I myself had used for construction and demolition was turned against my own security. The metallic crunch of the chain snapping was shockingly loud, a violation that echoed in the quiet of my workshop. The gate swung open. They were on my property. They crept in, moving low and fast. The second man, the shorter one, was now carrying something new. It was a rifle, but not a conventional one. It had a long barrel and an oversized stock. A tranquilizer dart gun. My breath caught in my throat. They had come to sedate my dogs, to render them helpless and haul them away into the night. This was no longer just trespassing or harassment. It was a premeditated felony, an attempted theft of my animals from my own yard. They moved past the workshop windows, their boots quiet on the grass. They were heading for the back patio, where Max and Riley slept. My dogs are trained, but they are also deeply bonded to this home. They know the sound of my truck, my footsteps, the creak of the back door. They also know the sound of things that don't belong. I didn't have to give a command. I heard it first, a low, guttural growl that was not a sound of aggression, but of deep-throated warning. On the monitor showing the patio camera, I saw Riley lift his head. Max was already on his feet, a silent, dark shadow. Then came the bark. It wasn't the frantic yapping of a startled pet. It was a single, deep, concussive woof. A command and an alarm, all in one. The two men froze mid-step. They had expected to find sleeping family pets. They were now faced with two trained K9s, fully alert and advancing on them with a discipline that was far more terrifying than any wild aggression. The men's plan shattered in an instant. Panic took over. They were no longer hunters, they were prey. The taller one, the one with the dart gun, took a clumsy step backward, and his foot caught on the thick garden hose I'd left coiled near the spigot. He went down hard, his arms flailing as he tried to break his fall. The dart gun flew from his hands and skidded across the concrete patio stones, coming to rest near the barbecue. The second man, seeing his partner go down, made a panicked dash for the open side gate. In his terror, he misjudged the distance and slammed his shoulder directly into the solid steel gate post with a sickening thud. He staggered back, clutching his arm and crying out in pain. It was a scene of pure, chaotic incompetence. Max and Riley didn't charge. They didn't maul. They advanced steadily, a unified wall of controlled canine authority. Their barks now sharp and rhythmic, pinning the intruders in the pool of light from the back porch. The man on the ground scrambled to his feet, his eyes wide with fear. He saw his partner disabled, the dart gun out of reach. He grabbed the only thing he could, a long-handled catch pole he dropped. In a desperate, foolish move, he swung it wildly at Riley. Riley, trained for exactly this scenario, dodged the pole with fluid grace, and then did his job. There was a quick lunge, a snap of jaws on the man's forearm, and an immediate release. It was a classic defensive bite, designed to neutralize a threat, not to inflict serious injury, but it was enough. The man screamed, a high-pitched sound of pure terror, and dropped the pole. He scrambled backward on the grass, crab-walking away from the dogs, his bravado completely gone. While all this was unfolding in less than 30 seconds, I was already on the phone. My fingers were steady as I dialed 911. "I need to report a break-in and assault in progress," I said to the dispatcher, my voice calm and clear. I gave my address, described the two men, their uniforms, their van, and the fact that they were on my property and had attempted to assault my dogs. "They are still here," I said, watching the monitor as the two terrified men finally decided to flee. They scrambled for the side gate, the one with the bitten arm clutching it as he stumbled through. They ran for their van, falling over each other in their haste to get away. I could hear the faint, distant sound of sirens growing closer. The van's engine roared to life. Its headlights cut through the darkness. They were making a run for it. But as their van peeled out onto the access road, two sets of headlights turned the corner at the end of the street. The night exploded in flashing red and blue lights, pinning the white van in a blinding, inescapable trap. The game was over. The flashing lights painted my living room in frantic strokes of red and blue. I called Max and Riley inside, checked them over quickly. They were unharmed, keyed up but perfectly fine, and then secured them in my office. I walked out my front door for the first time in this whole ordeal, and was met by the cool night air and the quiet hum of a neighborhood waking up. Lights were flicking on in houses, up and down the street. Curtains were being pulled back. A few brave souls were already standing on their porches, wrapped in bathrobes, their faces illuminated by the police lights. The scene on the access road was one of controlled chaos. Two sheriff's deputies had the fake animal control officers out of the van and were sitting them down on the curb, separated from each other. The taller one was blustering, waving his arms, while the shorter one just sat there, head in his hands, nursing his bitten arm. A third deputy, a woman with a calm and professional demeanor, walked up my driveway. She looked like a sergeant. "Are you the homeowner who called this in?" she asked, her flashlight beam sweeping briefly over me before she pointed it at the ground. "Yes, I am," I said. "Thank you for the fast response." My voice was steady. The adrenaline was there, but it was cold, not hot. It was fuel for clarity. "I have video footage of the entire incident, starting with them cutting the lock on my gate," I told her. "They were on my property, and one of them was armed with a tranquilizer dart gun." The sergeant's eyes narrowed just slightly. "A dart gun? Can you show me?" I led her inside, not to my messy workshop, but to the clean, organized kitchen, where my binder of evidence sat waiting on the table. The deputies had brought the two men around to the front and were questioning them by their patrol cars now, right in the middle of the street for all the waking neighbors to see. The officer's body cam was running, its little red light a steady beacon. I opened the binder. "It all started Saturday morning," I began. I walked the sergeant through it, step by methodical step. I showed her the time-stamped photos of the first visit, the fraudulent seizure order, the screenshot of their unmarked SUV's license plate. I showed her Karen's letter to the community and the printout of the HOA web post where she'd used a still from my hacked security camera feed. The sergeant listened intently, nodding. Then I turned my monitor around and played the video from 10 minutes ago. We watched in clear infrared as they cut the chain. We watched them enter my yard. We watched the shorter man holding the dart gun. We watched them panic when my dogs alerted. We watched the chaotic retreat, the fall over the garden hose, the desperate swing of the catch pole, and Riley's clean defensive bite. We watched them flee. The sergeant was silent for a long moment after the video ended. "And the dart gun?" she asked. "It should be on the back patio, near the barbecue," I replied. She keyed her radio and spoke in a low voice. A minute later, another deputy came to the door. "We found it, Sergeant. Just where he said." The pieces were all snapping into place, creating a picture of guilt that was impossible to deny. The deputies outside had found the fake badges and the bolt cutters in the van. The bite on the man's arm perfectly matched the defensive action shown in the video. Their story about a lawful seizure was falling apart under the barest of scrutiny. Then I handed the sergeant the final, most important part of my collection. "There's one more thing," I said. "This shows who was giving the orders." It was an email chain. My neighbor, Bill, the one with the shed, had found it. His wife was on the community newsletter committee and had access to some of the board's public communications folder. Buried in a subfolder Karen must have forgotten about was an email exchange between her official HOA account and an anonymous address. But the content was damning. The first email, from Karen, was sent Sunday evening, right after her hired goons had been publicly shamed by the real animal control officer. It read, "Your first attempt was a failure. You were unprepared. This cannot happen again. The meeting is next week. I need this handled before then. Get the dogs out, quietly. I don't care how you do it." The reply from the anonymous address was short. "It'll cost extra. Night work is dangerous." And Karen's final reply, sent just this morning, "Fine. Just get it done tonight. We'll be rid of him for good." It was the smoking gun. It was conspiracy, plain and simple, written in her own words. The sergeant read the emails twice. She took the binder from me, now as official evidence. She looked at me, a new level of respect in her eyes. "You have done our job for us," she said. The news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. By morning, everyone knew. The local paper, tipped off by someone who heard the commotion, ran a small story online that quickly became their most read article. "Fake animal control busted in HOA scheme." By midday, 2 of the HOA board members, men who had always just gone along with Karen, had quietly submitted their resignations. They wanted no part of the criminal conspiracy that was now public knowledge. The final act came later that afternoon. I was watching from my front window. 2 sheriff's cruisers pulled up, not to my house, but to Karen's, 2 doors down. The sergeant from last night and another deputy walked up her manicured lawn and knocked on her gleaming front door. Karen answered, dressed in a tennis outfit, a look of indignant surprise on her face. The surprise curdled into disbelief, and then pure, unadulterated fury as the sergeant spoke to her, showing her the warrant. They cuffed her right there on her doorstep, the sun glinting off the metal. The woman who had tried to rule our neighborhood with iron-fisted control, who had hidden behind fraudulent documents and vicious lies, was now being led away like a common criminal. Her reign of terror was over. The receipts had been tallied, and the bill had finally come due. The weeks that followed were a strange mixture of quiet and upheaval. Even after Karen's arrest and the subsequent legal proceedings began, a certain tension lingered in the air. For me, it settled into a new, unwelcome habit. Every night, before turning in, I would walk the perimeter of my house. I'd check the new lock on the side gate, run my hand over the fresh chain, and then double-check the lock on the back door. Then, I'd go inside and check the front door. It was a compulsion born from violation. The feeling of safety in my own home had been broken, and I was patiently piecing it back together, one locked door at a time. My dogs, however, were unfazed. Max and Riley went back to their routine of sunbathing on the patio and watching the squirrels with quiet dignity. But something had changed for them too. They were now minor local celebrities. Neighbors who used to cross the street to avoid them now walked by and gave a little wave. Some would even stop at a respectful distance and say, "Good dogs," with a newfound admiration. They had become a symbol of the neighborhood's turning point, the quiet guardians who had stood their ground. The real victory, however, happened not on my lawn but in a courtroom. The case against Karen and her two hired thugs was swift and undeniable, thanks to the mountain of evidence I had meticulously collected. They were found guilty on multiple charges, including conspiracy, criminal trespass, and attempted animal theft. But the fallout for the HOA as an entity was just as significant. Represented by a lawyer, Frank had recommended I filed a civil suit. The court's judgment was a complete and total vindication. The judge ordered the HOA to repay every cent of my legal costs. They were also ordered to pay for property damages, the new gate lock and chain, and a full security audit of my system. And then came the part that mattered almost more than the money. The court ordered the HOA, under its new leadership, to issue a formal, written public apology to me, and to circulate it to every single homeowner. It was an acknowledgement, in black and white, that the system had been abused and that I had been wrong. A week after the court ruling, I got a visit. It was a real city animal control truck this time, and Officer Davies stepped out. He wasn't there for a call. He came to the door with a file in his hand. He told me the sheriff's department had forwarded him a copy of my evidence binder as a training example. "I've been doing this job for 20 years, Officer Davies said, standing on my front step. "And I've never seen documentation this thorough from a civilian. It was textbook. You gave them no wiggle room, no way to twist the narrative. You just gave them the facts. You taught a lot of people a lesson about how to handle bullies. That, more than anything, felt like the final seal on the whole affair. My quiet, patient work, born from a simple need to protect my home, had been recognized as the correct and powerful tool that it was. The emergency HOA meeting that Karen had called to have me evicted did eventually happen, but its purpose was entirely different. The clubhouse was packed. The mood was somber, but also determined. Bill, my neighbor who had the trouble with his shed, was the first to speak. He stood up and simply said, "We let one person have too much power, and we all paid the price. That ends tonight." One by one, others who had shared their stories with me in secret now stood up and told them in public. A new board was elected on the spot, with Bill unanimously voted in as the new president. Their first official act was to pass a new bylaw, named the Oak Street Mandate. It was a simple, one-sentence rule. Any and all HOA enforcement requests that require access to a homeowner's private property must be formally submitted to and executed by the county sheriff's office. The era of intimidation by fake uniforms and executed fraudulent letters was over, replaced by a simple, unbreakable chain of accountability. The peace that settled over the neighborhood was real this time. It wasn't the silence of fear. It was the comfortable quiet of mutual respect. Sometimes, in the evenings, I sit on my back patio. Max and Riley lie at my feet, their breathing slow and even. The new lock on the gate gleams in the dusk, a small, silver reminder of the fight that was won. It's a reminder that my home is secure not just because of the lock, but because I was willing to stand up and prove the truth. You can fake a badge, you can fake a story, but you can't fake the truth when the cameras are rolling.